the last 2 episodes, we've been to 2 towns that Jesus had cursed, Chorazin and Bethsaida. But there is a 3rd town, the town which was the center of Jesus' ministry in Galilee. The town where Peter's mother-in-law lived, the town of Capernaum. Located on the northwest side of the Lake of Galilee, the ruins of Capernaum are divided into 2 sites, the Franciscan and the Greek Orthodox. Unlike Jerusalem and other touristy ancient places in Israel, Capernaum seems to be untouched, still in its raw form. Just by walking here and looking at the lake, the hills, the mountains, we felt connected to its history. It is as if we could almost see Jesus walking on these shores, looking at the same hills.
It is so serene and quiet. It's the perfect place to bring a Bible and just read in the morning.
And besides the breathtaking nature, Capernaum has fascinating ruins. A 4th century synagogue built on top of the original one where Jesus taught, a house which is believed to be the house of Simon Peter the Apostle, the ruins of the old city, and much more. So join us in this episode as we explore this fascinating place.
Until you see the sign leading you to Capernaum. The sign says, the town of Jesus. So let's enter and understand why. The town was active from the 1st century until the 10th century, for about 1,000 years, but then was abandoned and lost, until the Franciscans purchased the ruins back in 1894, and have been excavating and restoring the site ever since. Let's visit the 2 most important highlights of Capernaum, the synagogue and the house of Saint Peter. So after Jesus was rejected from Nazareth, he relocates, and he chooses to move down here by the shore of the Sea of Galilee to this village of Capernaum. Capernaum in Hebrew, it means the village of Nahum. Why would he come down here? There are probably many reasons. One of them is obvious. He has friends here. Peter and his brother Andrew are residents of this area, and the other couple of brothers, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, are also residents of this area. They're all fishermen by the lake. So by coming here, he already has a group of friends that he can relate to. They can protect him. Together, they become a group. And we also know that the town was on the highway, on the main road, the Via Maris. We know that because they found milestones here. And we also read in the scripture that there was a centurion, a Roman officer, there were tax collectors. So it's on the highway. And we also know that it is very close to what was then the border between Galilee and Judea, where Herod Antipas is the governor, to Philip's portion of the land is a few miles away. And therefore, by being close to the border, it's possible for Jesus to get on the boat and sail away from danger. Jesus chooses Capernaum as his hometown for the 2 to 3 years of his life that we call the ministry of Galilee. Most homes of the town are built out of the local black basalt rocks. The one building that stands out is the synagogue, built out of white limestone. Let's go into the ancient synagogue. So this is the late 4th century white synagogue, built upon the remains of the synagogue of Jesus. You can see the older synagogue was made out of basalt rock. And then in the 5th century, a renovation was made, and the white synagogue was built on top. The white synagogue was built in the basilica design, with 2 rows of columns, dividing the space into 2 naves. The entrance is decorated with carved stone friezes with typical Jewish symbols such as flower wreaths, palm trees, and geometric designs. I would like to mention the ongoing dispute whether this was really built as a synagogue. Those who oppose argue that the building looks more like a Roman temple and that the orientation is reverse, as the building is facing north instead of south towards Jerusalem. Those who argue that it is a synagogue show that there are seats on three sides and the symbols carved into the decorated stones are Jewish symbols. So the argument whether the old synagogue was a synagogue or not, I think this display here gives the answer. The Star of David. Here's an amphora with grapes growing out of it. Here, Hebrew inscription. And a menorah. Another Star of David. Grapes. Pomegranates. Another Star of David. This mobile ark on wheels could explain the orientation problem. Once the community is ready, they would roll the ark into the building and the congregation would turn and face the Holy Ark. There's a pit here where you can look down and see possibly the ruins of an earlier synagogue, maybe even back to the 1st century, to the time of Jesus, because they walked over to the house. Look how close the synagogue is to the house. We're in the synagogue. And there's the house right underneath the church that's on the stilts. Very close to the synagogue, the excavations revealed a house that looks very different than all the other homes of the town. The house was enlarged and expanded 3 times, and the final phase was a 5th century octagonal church with a mosaic floor. The explanation is that this must have been the house owned by St. Peter and his family, and one room was Jesus' room. The early Christians living in the town venerated this room, then later turned it into a house church, a domus ecclesia, and finally, during the Byzantine period, a church was built on the exact location of Jesus' room in St. Peter's house. And of course, the modern church was built on top. About 20 years ago, it was built on stilts. So the ancient ruins of Peter's house could remain visible, and there's a glass floor inside the church where you can look down and see the ruins. Before we walk down to the beach, let's take a closer look at the statue of Simon, son of Jonah, the Galilean fisherman from Capernaum. In his hands he is holding the keys to the kingdom of heaven and the shepherd's staff, and at his feet is the fish named after him, St. Peter's fish. And the new name, Peter, the rock, given to him by Jesus. It says, copy of the mosaic floor of the 5th century church built above St. Peter's house. And in the center of the mosaic is a depiction of a peacock. The peacock was used in the ancient Christian art as a symbol of the resurrection and the afterlife. We see the peacock symbol in many churches in the Holy Land. Walking here on the shores of the Sea of Galilee is where I would like to remind us all that one can argue over the location of a building or a house, but the Lake Kinneret, hasn't changed. The scenery, the smell, the sound of the water, they are all exactly the same as they were back in the 1st century. Next time you visit, make time to sit here for a few minutes and just let the lake guide you. And I really hope that you enjoyed this tour of Capernaum, the town of Jesus. So if you did, please give me a big thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel and write a comment. Let me know where you'd like to go on our next tour of wonderful Israel. Bye everyone and take care.